Uh, in terms of the sustainable growth, what are the advantages and disadvantages facing the Vietnam's economy in the fourth wave investment in your view?
Okay,
Yeah.
right. And you had another question you asked me about how to reduce the risks and take the opportunities to catch up to
exactly.
Thailand and Malaysia.
Yeah.
And the two are connected because the fourth wave, blah, 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 that people talk about, it's all about IT, it's all about internet, it's all about the internet of things and everything being connected, right? And that's going to have all sorts of implications and ramifications for professional service industries as well as traditional workers. Vietnam can do a lot to catch up in that area, right? Because the Internet of Things, IT, this wave of future business opportunities, does not really need hard infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
And Vietnam really struggles with hard infrastructure, right? Taking 10, 20, 30 years to build the ports, to build the public transport, to build this, to build that, right? So the industries that rely on heavy infrastructure are still have this budget problem and land clearance problems and all these other problems. But IT, you need internet, you need electricity, but the only thing you really need is people. Right? So I think if you want to catch up quickly with Thailand or Malaysia, invest in people, but also have a really grand vision for Vietnam IT. Right? My idea, and I know already there's some steps in that direction, but you need to take those steps and make them 10 times bigger. Right? So my idea, Hanoi is the political capital of Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh City is the business capital of Vietnam. So Da Nang should be the IT capital of Vietnam. It should be the Silicon Valley, right? It should be the competitor with India, and it can be a beautiful place, and it has to be a beautiful place because the people who work in these industries are middle or high income people. They want very nice lives, and you don't want to just target Vietnamese. Maybe if you had a big IT hub cluster in Da Nang, half the workers would be Vietnamese and half would be from other countries, America, Australia, Russia, whatever, China. So yeah, if you had a really grand vision for IT and pushed it, that's how you catch up to the Malaysias and go past the Malaysias and the Thailands.
And how about the disadvantage? Do you think the infrastructure is the biggest disadvantage for Vietnam to catch up?
No. Infrastructure is good enough, and the government is spending and doing as much as they can. Obviously, the delays in projects is a problem, and Vietnam seems to be slower than other countries. But I don't think it's the big bottleneck. What you've got to do is the 100 really small, difficult things to make it easier and better to do business in Vietnam, not just for foreign investors. In fact, not really for foreign investors, for large Vietnamese enterprises, more than just household, proper businesses to do business. And that means the whole range, right? Property rights, intellectual, physical property rights, foreclosure, access to finance, a more fair and transparent legal system, the whole package. As you know, there's two parts to getting it right. One is writing and changing the rules and regulations, and two is implementing them properly. And number two is the biggest problem. So there's a lot of work on that needs to be done. There's no single thing. There's hundreds of little things that need to be done. And that way you become a stronger and stronger and safer and better business environment.
already so a lot of foreign investors said that the administrative procedure in Vietnam is something very complicated, and it is one of the difficult for them. Yet how do you think about this idea?
Foreign investors always complain.
Yeah, always complain. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Although the administrative procedure will be improved, but it is very little for them. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of administrative procedures have improved a lot, and I think it's not so much the procedures; it's the transparent implementation of this, what I was talking about before. But foreign investors will always complain, and that's okay. That's their job. But you don't need to believe and run around doing everything they complain about. There are some very good reasons why some processes take some time. For example, environment protection. So, not everything should be Vietnamese or foreign enterprises. You have to balance the interests of society as a whole. And Vietnam, I think, does a pretty good job on that. But again, there's 100 areas where they can move forward and do better. But generally, let's face it, Vietnam is an attractive destination for foreign investment, and there's a lot coming in. So maybe they're complaining about other countries even more.
And now we are talking a little bit about the green economy. How do you think? Can you give me which field, which sector?
I mean,
the economy we invest or develop in the coming time?
I'm not a big fan of all these labels and impact funds and green funds and green economies and circular economies and blah blah blah. I think a lot of it is hot air. In the green economy area, the obvious investments that are already happening are in alternative energy, solar and wind. But they're happening not because they're green, but because they're good investments, right? The incentive structure, the tariffs that the Vietnamese government's offered, and the security of the business environment is good enough. So serious money is going into electricity generation, green, clean energy.
Clean energy.
But it's not because anybody's seen the light to stop polluting. You shouldn't lecture businesses, you shouldn't nag businesses, or you shouldn't expect businesses to do the right thing because it's the right thing, right? If there's more money to be made in dirty energy, then that's what they'll invest in. And across the board, what makes businesses, well, let me say, businesses are profit maximizing. They're in a very competitive environment, and if you say to them, oh, you should think about society and men and women and environment and everything else as well as doing your business, mostly they'll ignore you. When they don't ignore you is because it has an impact on their business, right? And I'll give you two examples. One example is the big garment and footwear manufacturers, Gap and Walmart, for example. They pay very careful attention in Vietnam and other countries to make sure that those producing the shoes and clothing for them are not using child labour, are using safe factories that are not going to burn down or fall down. They really monitor this strongly. Why? Because rich country consumers get very angry if a Nike factory burns down and kills people, or if a Gap or Walmart factory is using children as labourers, right? The pressure comes from the consumers to do the right thing, and the factory responds, right? Another example is, say, in petroleum, Exxon and BP. They do a lot to minimise their environmental damage, actually, and they do a lot to try to avoid environmental disasters like the ships, because they know when it happens, they will have enormous PR problems, and they will be attacked and sued and have to pay large fines and penalties, and the government will be after them. So consumers can push businesses to do the right thing. Government is very important to push businesses to do the right thing. They have two tools. One is punishments, regulations and punishments. If you damage the environment, this is going to happen to you. And the other is government has expenditure. Right? So if government wants to protect the environment, they can directly spend on the problem, right? Or they could directly subsidise removing dirty chimney stacks and putting clean ones in, or something like that. So government has a very important role to shape protection of people, society, and businesses. Don't think that businesses will do it on their own. Government is so important, and therefore taxes are so important to get these sorts of things done.
Government always important.
But there's been a trend in the last 40 years to try and bash government, particularly coming out of America, and keep everything small and deregulate everything. But in my opinion, it's gone too far.
And regarding to the recently agreement, you know, the RCEP. And I want to know what's the opportunities for Vietnamese business in this agreement?
I mean, it's a massive agreement.
Yeah.
And it has some very important chapters.
Yeah.
Although some others are missing, but others in IP and so on will have a real impact. They will open up markets for Vietnam and open up the Vietnamese market.
Yeah.
So whether, to what extent that's good, depends to what extent you believe in free trade. I do. I believe in the magic of markets and competitive markets and the gains from trade. And I understand the concept. Actually, it's an accounting identity of comparative advantage. Therefore, I like what I see in RCEP. I like that they're forming this harmonising. Again, it's like the business environment in Vietnam. The international trading environment, you can make 100 steps forward by harmonising, by having your easier rules of origin, by having skilled people able to have their certification acknowledged in other countries. There's many little steps for economic integration and efficiencies and basically doing business easier. So RCEP will have an impact, but of course it takes time for these things to be implemented and rolled out. But I'm very optimistic about it, whereas I'm not so optimistic about ASEAN and APEC. There's been a lot of talk and lots of fumbling and lots of pilot testing. But if you say, what are the big achievements, you know, that, for example, they talked about an ASEAN tourist visa for 30 years. What are the big achievements? The green lanes, maybe a few things, but I think RCEP will be more serious.
And can you give any forecast about which sector in which I get a lot of benefit from the agreement?
Mostly trading goods.
Trading goods?
Yeah, because you're going to have a smoother relationship with China and Japan. So you have input markets and output market access too. It's a pity America's not part of it. I hope under the new administration they will think about that. But you have your own bilateral trade agreement with America anyway, and your own European one. So this really is an ASEAN one. Apparently the British are knocking on the door. I don't know how they fit into the APEC area, but they want to. So it is a big and important area, but I just hope that because there's more developed countries in it, they will push the agenda more than just the ASEAN group have been able to do, which is basically led by Indonesia, and Indonesia basically aren't committed to free trade. They're rather protectionist, and that's been a huge problem.
And many people say that with agreement, including the China in this agreement, and many people say that maybe the trade deficit from China to Vietnam is maybe increased. And how do you think about this idea?
As an economist,
Yeah.
the bilateral trade deficit with another country is totally irrelevant and unimportant.
Yeah.
Go back to Economics 101, right? Don't
Yeah.
listen to Donald Trump or anybody else.
Yeah.
Somehow, what economists agree is absolutely not important, irrelevant,
Yeah.
is a global political concern.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens. Obviously, nobody listens to us. What matters is your overall trade balance with all countries, right? Now, if that's in balance, more or less, doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's not way out of balance, your surplus with all other countries, then because in this country you sell more and you buy from this country, just doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
So China, is both a supplier and a market, destination market for Vietnam. And whether one is more than the other just is not important at all, right? What matters in the world economy for Vietnam is that you are fully integrated into value chains, right? You are part of the action of producing nearly everything, right? And you are. Vietnam's very good at that. But you will steadily replace China in that role. And you need to move up these value chains. So for example, in textiles and garments, you've gone through the phase, or you were going through the phase of just assembling the items. And now you have learned the industry, and it takes time. It takes 10, 20 years. You have a number of Vietnamese who understand the garment industry in great detail. Then they are making plans to do direct exporting and have direct contracts, and to move into the management and logistics and the financing, which is what the Taiwanese and the South Koreans do. So that's a very complicated business, but it's where the real money is. So Vietnam, when we talk about catching up to Thailand, Malaysia, maybe it's more important to catch up to South Korea and Taiwan.
Yeah. And the final question I want to know is, as you know, in the new normal, next normal, with the new agreement and the new context, do you have any advice for the Vietnamese enterprises in this context?
I think everyone keeps talking about the new normal. I just don't know what they're talking about, and I don't think they know what they're talking about either. COVID is here, it will go next year. The only long-term repercussions of COVID I see